Moving on now. Your nuclear veterans need you.
Because in the 1950s and 1960s, more than 22,000 British servicemen worked on nuclear tests in Australia and the South Pacific.
Campaigners believe that they suffered cancers and had children with birth defects because of the radiation. The Ministry of Defence, obviously, deny this.
Now, though, the veterans' annual reunion at Pontins is under threat and they are in desperate need of a sponsor.
And we're joined in the studio now by Alan Owen, the founder of LABRATS International, and Brian Unthank, a nuclear test veteran. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. We spoke to you, Alan, didn't we, a couple of weeks ago, and your story touched us so much and touched our viewers as well, and we really wanted to get you back in here because this feels like such an unjust situation. And so just remind people who don't know, what happened to the veterans, to the soldiers at the time with the testing?
So Britain today is actually the 72nd anniversary of the first British test, Operation Hurricane at the Montebello Islands off Australia. So it's 72 years ago that we first tested nuclear weapons. And we carried on testing as Britain up until 1991 with underground testing in the Nevada desert. And these men were sent to these remote locations, Brian to Christmas Island especially, with the majority of people at Operation Grapple to test these nuclear bombs. And these guys witnessed these detonations as close as 10 miles away, up to 20 miles away on ships, on the island. Imagine detonating a nuclear weapon now and just standing and watching it, and they were ordered to stand and watch. They could feel the blast, they could feel the heat. They got knocked off their feet. They were stuck on an island in the middle of the Pacific. There, some of them for national service, and they had to stand and watch.
Did they get paid anything for this?
No.
Extraordinary.
Absolutely
So they
not.
had to go, and some of them have suffered really serious health issues.
Yes.
Such as yourself, Brian, who's here this morning. You've had how many skin cancers now?
93 so far. I was supposed to go back in October and get more removed, but that's been put back another 6 months. And I lost my teeth at the age of 20.
Good Lord.
I'm now 86 years old.
And looking fabulous, if you don't mind me
I
saying
love
so.
the feeling of it.
We had a good hug this morning when we walked into the studio, didn't we? It's so
We did.
lovely
We
that you're
did.
here. What does this holiday mean to you as a veteran?
Well, we have going down to Sand Bay, meeting with Alan and lots of the other veterans and the descendants and widows and other people. It makes you feel part of a big family group. You're always made to feel welcome. Alan, Laura, his sister, and Mel, his wife, they're so welcoming. And all the volunteers who help make you feel, as I said, part of a major family, which we are.
Yeah.
Now there's only 2,500 of us left.
And you're all pensioners.
I am.
You're all pensioners,
Yes.
and money is scarce. Money is tight.
And now they're taking away our £300
They are.
as well.
Of course they are.
As well. My wife and I tried to live frugally so that we got a little bit of money to make sure we got a comfortable life. Having that £300 taken away from us knocks a little bit of a hole.
I'm sure it does.
Yeah.
Alan, you lost your dad,
Yep.
who was one of the nuclear test veterans as well, and this is the medal that you have. If I can just show you this. And you're wearing this as well,
I am,
right?
I am.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
They came loose in a jiffy bag, no pin to pin it onto the chest.
They sent it to you in a jiffy bag?
Yes.
In a jiffy bag, the box, the medal and the ribbon were loose within the box.
Good Lord.
And you had to go out and buy a pin to sew the ribbon so you could pin it to your chest.
So that was a pretty half-hearted gesture
Yes.
from the government.
Half-hearted, I would even say less than that.
Yeah, well, quite. How do you feel, Alan? Sorry, do you feel, Brian, that you were conned into going to Christmas Island?
Didn't even know where. When I was 19, I got posted. I was told you're being posted to Christmas Island.
Sounds
That's
nice.
lovely, doesn't it?
Where is it?
Yeah.
Don't know. How will I get there? You know, oh, you've got to go to London Airport and there's a plane waiting for you. That's my orders.
And just people will find this so baffling, I think, in 2024, when we live in an age of consent and health and safety and risk assessment, that nobody told you the potential harms that you would suffer to your health for being tested in these conditions.
Not at all. Not at all. Nobody knew what was going on. They didn't know where I was going.
And I think more importantly, they still haven't accepted that your health conditions and those of the other 22,000 soldiers are related to the testing.
Yeah. And the MOD said, you're safe.
Yeah. And the medical records are mysteriously missing.
Yes. I'm according to a lady, Susie Boniface, who's looked at my service records just out of interest to get the depth of what was going wrong, because others are the same. I'm 20 pages missing.
20 pages.
Mm-hmm. And it's all at the time at Christmas Island.
Right. And how long were you on Christmas Island for?
9 months.
Were you really?
And I was told if you're a day over 9 months, you will be registered as insane.
Good Lord.
But many people were there for 5 years.
Yeah, longer.
And Alan, just explain to us, some of you said that subsequent birth defects in children of the veterans as well, that this has had effects over generations.
Yeah, so we as descendants came along, obviously, after our father's participation, and we found that as a first-generation descendant, second generation, third generation, fourth generation, there's lots of birth defects, there's lots of miscarriages, there are lots of stillborn children, horrific things that are happening to the descendants down the line that are still happening now to great-grandchildren, and even now great-great-grandchildren are suffering with teeth problems, skeletal problems, autoimmune diseases. And when you get, say, 50 descendants in a room and the autoimmune disease that somebody says I've got is 1 in 10,000, and then 3 people put their hand up out of the 50, you think this is not a coincidence.
This is a great scandal, isn't it?
Isn't it?
Absolutely. It's the longest running, 72 years.
Yeah.
And we're the only testing country that has denied responsibility.
Really?
America, France.
We've got the infected blood and all that, but this is a terrible scandal. These young men, just young men, teenagers. When I was a teenager.
I mean, when the Isle of Man announced that they would make an apology and compensate their veterans, it was a very small number, and the Fijians did it as well.
Right.
And the Fijians announced that they would do it because they knew that the UK weren't and were dragging their heels with it. It's just a disgrace.
Time's running out. You're not getting any younger, Brian. How old are you? 86?
I'm 86. I'll be 87 in January.
Yeah.
And which MPs have supported you over the years?
So we've had great support from Rebecca Long-Bailey. We've had great support from...
We're hoping to talk to Rebecca this morning later in the show.
Emma Lulbuck.
We're talking to her this morning.
Yeah, and we've had great support from Sir John Hayes, who's been a very, very staunch campaigner for us over many, many years. But the reason for the medal is because we got to meet Boris Johnson. It was Boris Johnson that got us that medal. And I know some people love him or hate him, but he was the one that instigated that medal after we saw him.
Very nice to get the medal, but it would be nice if they hadn't put it in a jiffy bag.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Not much, is it?
And unfortunately, when we got us the medal, it was Rishi Sunak that announced the medal.
Right.
Boris was already gone at that point. And it was just almost given through gritted teeth.
Sure. Now, I'm sure a lot of GB News viewers and listeners want to help these guys have their trip to Pontins. How much do you need? So we have a week-long reunion. It costs around £25,000 to give them a free week.
And it's £150 per person for the week for your food and your lodges, just to be clear, because £25,000 might sound like a lot, but 150 quid a head for all those people doesn't sound like it's going to break the bank.
£150 for them for the whole week. And then we include entertainment. We have traditional dancers from people on Christmas Island come and give traditional dances. Right. We have a singer, and we provide entertainment for these guys, as well as updates from around the world, and get everybody involved. And it's for their mental health.
Of course.
A lot of these guys are now living on their own.
Yeah.
They look forward to it, and if they can't afford it...
I think we're looking at you in a Hawaiian shirt.
There's Brian in a Hawaiian shirt.
Looking fabulous.
Yeah. and Brian, I think in your own family, there were miscarriages.
My first wife, excuse me, Marianne is my second wife.
Yeah.
My first wife has passed away. She had about a dozen quite dangerous miscarriages before she was able to carry her first child, who then found that she had a double womb, one hidden behind each other. They said it's normal, just go away. I had 3 sons by my first wife. The third one had 2 large holes in his heart. And they said, oh, that's normal. My third grandchild from my first son, a bit convoluted here, but he had a black melanoma growing on his forehead at 14 months old.
Good God.
My daughter-in-law is a state-registered nurse, midwife, and I told all of my children, you must inform all medical people that I was on Christmas Island and strange things are going to or could happen to our children.
Brian, do you feel angry? Have you been angry over the years?
It's waste of time getting angry now. I'm too old to be angry. No matter what we do, we've been to the MOD a couple of times and surrounded by armed police officers. And I was in a T-shirt and a pair of shorts. I'm a terrorist now, 86-year-old terrorist.
Well,
but they said we were safe.
Thank you for your amazing work. And honestly, we want you to go on this holiday.
We do.
We really do. It's the least you deserve. I want you to have unlimited compensation, frankly, for you and all your descendants. But
exactly.
It's a scandal. If you do want to donate, and I'm sure you do, to the Veterans Reunion, we've got this little QR code in the bottom right-hand of your screen. I know everybody doesn't like these, but if you open the camera on your phone and you scan it there against the screen, it will take you straight to the page. Or
you go to gofundme.com and search for Nuclear Test Veterans Reunion 2025. And if all else fails, if you send us a cheque, we'll get it to the right place.
And on the gbnews.com website, we will have all the information as well. Right, we wish you well.
Lovely to meet you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Lovely to
Thank you.
Very Betty dancers even got us up on the dance floor and wanted to put grass skirts on us.
Fantastic. Well, we will get you there.
Much.
Send us your pictures, your holiday
exactly.
snaps, won't you?
Yes, thank you.
Thanks for coming in.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. As well, your nuclear veterans need you. Recapping this morning, in the 50s and 60s, more than 22,000 British servicemen worked on nuclear tests in Australia and the South Pacific.
The campaign said they suffered cancers, had children with birth defects because of the radiation. The Ministry of Defence deny this.
So the veterans want access to their medical records, they want compensation, they want a public inquiry into what happened to them. How can that not have happened? And they want this annual reunion at Pontins. You have already been giving money this morning, and we're joined now by nuclear veteran Captain Terry Hughes. Terry, just first of all, your reaction to the news that our lovely viewers and listeners have already given £12,000 of their hard-earned money this morning towards your holiday.
I think it's wonderful, absolutely wonderful.
Now, Terry, tell us about your experience. Were you on Christmas Island?
Well, I was in the Royal Fleet Auxiliary, and our ship was sent to Christmas Island, and we expected to go to Hawaii because that's where they had actually sent the ships during the explosions. However, when we got there, we found out they were actually going to explode a hydrogen bomb while we were there. Now, interestingly enough, the Royal Fleet Auxiliary personnel, officers and men alike, were all civilians. Although we fly under the MOD ensign, the blue ensign, and paid by the MOD, we were actually all civilians, we're not military. So when we arrived there, we were very, very surprised about this H-bomb test. In fact, our crew were very, very unhappy, insomuch that the resident naval officer had to come out to the ship to tell everybody, nothing to worry about, we've done this before, and everything will be right. And they gave the officers a dosimeter each, including myself, and that was it, and away he went. And then a few days later, the bomb was exploded. We were only, well, I guess, about 12, 15 miles away at the time. I was down below with the crew in case we had to evacuate them in a hurry. And I could see the flash coming right through the engine room skylights. It was a brilliant flash. And the bang, it was a terrible bang. It was more or less like standing next to a 4-inch gun without earplugs. And then immediately after that, there was this hurricane, this miniature hurricane wind come rushing through the ship. And after that, we were allowed up on deck to see this cloud, which was quite magnificent in its way, but very terrorizing as well. It was an unusual sight. And I was only 19 at the time, very much like Brian was.
And have you had help? I mean, Brian's told us all of his health issues. Terry, he lost his teeth. He's had 92 skin cancers. Have you suffered health problems too?
Yes, I've had a number of skin cancers removed, and I'm still waiting for another one. My previous wife, very similar to Brian, had a very bad miscarriage. My son is unable to have any children at all, and I've got a granddaughter who has epileptic fits, and that's never happened in the family before, never.
And Terry, over the years, I'm presuming that groups of you have tried to seek compensation, which I know wouldn't do a huge amount. If you've got your health, what use is wealth? But frankly, it's the least that you deserve. What have you been met with when you've inquired along those lines?
Well, interesting enough, when we left Christmas time, we went straight up to Iceland to take part in the Cod War. So we went from one extreme to the other. But immediately after that, it seemed to have a mental block. I blocked this situation out altogether and concentrated on career and family, etc. And it wasn't until the mid-80s that I started realizing that things weren't quite as they should be. And it's very, very odd. I couldn't understand at the time. We knew what happened in Japan with Hiroshima and Nagasaki with the bomb. And I thought, well, why are they experimenting with us as guinea pigs? I can understand doing the tests to try and improve the bomb itself to a certain extent anyway. But why experiment on the human beings? And gradually, as you get older, these things come out. It's like a hidden enemy that suddenly starts breaking out.
And how meaningful is this holiday to you that you have every year? We heard from Brian earlier how it just makes you feel less alone, really. You've got the camaraderie of all your friends and the descendants of the men who made this sacrifice for us. How important is it?
I think it's wonderful for all the families and descendants because we get to know, they talk about team bonding in the business world, but this is like a family bonding. It really brings you together. You get to know each other very, very well. I mean, when we joined, we hardly knew anybody at all, but now we know a number, nearly hundreds and hundreds of people, not only the direct veterans, but their descendants, their families, and they're a lovely lot, they really are. We have a great time. It's comforting to everybody, and it must be good for the mental health as well. I'm sure it is for me anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, best of luck, Terry. That's Captain Terry Hughes, nuclear veteran. And Terry, just to remind you, so far our listeners and viewers have already raised £12,000 towards your holiday. So we hope you'll be going there very soon. So lovely to talk to you. That's nuclear veteran Captain Terry Hughes, 19 as well, at the same time.
There's so much about this story that I just find so disturbing and worrying, and I just hope times have changed. Well,
let's talk now to the Labour MP for South Shields, Emma Lewell-Buck. Emma, very good to talk to you again. We last spoke, of course, at the Labour Party conference. I know that this has been an ongoing issue, but I feel like I've come to this rather new, and I'm frankly shocked and appalled to think that these men are still seeking no compensation and no culpability or responsibility admitted by the Ministry of Defence. These terrible illnesses they've endured are no coincidence.
I couldn't agree more. One of my constituents was involved in the nuclear tests at Mar-a-Lago. This has been the longest running scandal in British history. Yeah. For 70 years, these men and their families have been seeking truth and justice. In 2022, the Daily Mirror, after years and years of pressing and pushing the MOD admitted that these veterans had been tested before, during, and after these atomic tests. None of them seem to be able to get the truth from the MOD regarding their medical records. They get back, they do subject access requests, and they get back missing information. The MOD remains, the UK remains the only nuclear power to maintain that the tests caused our veterans no harm. My question to the MOD is, what science doesn't differ. You know, the science that the USA, New Zealand, France, Australia and Canada, who've all compensated their nuclear veterans are using, should be the same science we're applying to these tests. So what is the difference here?
Emma, Keir Starmer's having a bit of a rough time from a PR point of view, let's be honest. And a lot of this money that we're talking about that he got from Lord Ali, he could have a huge PR win here. He could really win over some goodwill from the public if he takes this as an issue and does something about it. Do you think he will?
Well, I would hope so. I mean, our Hillsborough law that was announced last week at party conference is a way of saying to the public, look, we're returning public service back to you. We want to make sure that there are no more state cover-ups and that the truth is always available for victims. So, but for me, these veterans, they haven't got much longer. They're dying month by month. They made a sacrifice for us, for our nation, and they and their families deserve an apology, but they also deserve access to their medical records and some compensation.
Yeah, they really, really do. And it's not just them, it's their children, their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren. I mean...
Emma, you'll be pleased to know that they're trying to raise money for their trip to Pontins next summer, and GB News viewers and listeners have so far raised, in the last half an hour, £16,000. Can I ask you, Emma, because last week I talked to you at the Labour conference...
We're joined now by Labour MP for Salford, Rebecca Long-Bailey. Rebecca, good morning. Thank you for joining us on GB News. It's a really, it's sort of emotionally conflicting morning for us, because we're so pleased that our viewers are donating so generously to give these guys their holiday and their families. But we shouldn't have to do this, Rebecca. These men should have been compensated long ago.
No, exactly. And firstly, I just want to thank all of the GB News viewers who've donated. I'm blown away. I know that this group of men and their families are inspirational people, and they've affected me and a number of other MPs. But to see the support that they're getting from your viewers, it really, it warms the cockles of your heart. But they shouldn't have to fight for recognition. And this is what's happened over the last 72 years. So all the way through, from the test through to the present day, they've known that something happened to them. They've seen what they've been through, their medical conditions, the fact that many of these servicemen died well before their time. And they were ignored in a way that other countries didn't ignore their similar testing veterans. So other nuclear powers across the world, the US, for example, compensated and recognised their nuclear testing veterans many, many years ago. Yet, unfortunately, successive governments in the UK failed to do that. Now, we had some good news last year, of course, after the long campaign for medallic recognition. Finally, these servicemen received medallic recognition, but it came in a jiffy bag in the post, which is not the way to honour the service that these men gave to our country. So firstly, they deserve that formal recognition event so that the country can honour them for their service. But secondly, there needs to be an understanding and an uncovering of the truth of what they actually went through. They've been fighting for many years for access to their medical records, for example, urine and blood tests that they know were taken during their service. But when many of these families have tried to access their records, these test results seem to be missing, and there's no explanation as to why this has happened. And those records are necessary, not just for an argument about compensation, but for accessing things such as war pensions, where they have to demonstrate that they've undergone a significant degree of risk during their service. So they're at a disadvantage, and it's just not fair for these men to have to fight for this long just to get justice and to uncover the truth. So, as I'm sure you've heard from the amazing campaigners and veterans this morning, they need to have that formal recognition. They need to have a full public inquiry to uncover the truth about what really happened to them. They need access to their full medical records so that they can access any war pensions that they should be entitled to. And beyond this, I think there needs to be a formal understanding and education within our national curriculum of the importance of these weapons tests, how they played their part in ensuring our safety and security, but the negative impact of that on those men and their families.
Rebecca, it's staggering, and actually I think it's shaming that successive governments over the last 72 years have just ducked responsibility when other countries around the world have taken responsibility. What basis does the Ministry of Defence say it's not our responsibility?
Well, it first uncovered the health effects of this in the 1980s, and there was a health study that was conducted by the government at the time. I think it was under Margaret Thatcher. And that health study determined that there really wasn't, any risk exposure by these testing veterans. But we know from other studies across the world and subsequent studies, it showed, staggeringly that these men were exposed to the same amount of radiation as cleanup workers at Chernobyl.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand that if you're that close to radioactive experiments, you are going to be affected significantly in some way. And not only you will be significantly affected, but it will impact on your whole life, your ability to reproduce. And that's why there are so many reports of miscarriages amongst this cohort of veterans. And that's never been properly investigated. So the world studies are there showing that the health impacts were real. Other countries across the world, nuclear powers, have accepted those studies. But unfortunately, the UK hasn't, and it's not been one political party that bears responsibility for this. This is all political parties who've been in government during the time that these tests took place and their aftermath that haven't addressed this properly. And I think now, after 72 years of fighting just for the truth, these men and their families deserve to know what really happened to them.
So should they be optimistic now, Rebecca, with yourself and also Emma Llewellyn-Buck, who we spoke to earlier, fantastic MP from the North East? You've got the responsibility now. You ladies have got the power. Make it happen.
That's right, and we've been pressing the Labour front bench to take action. To be fair, before the election, they were hugely supportive. When we were trying to get meetings last year in relation to the medallic recognition, Keir was one of the first party leaders to meet the veterans. Equally, Boris Johnson, who was the Prime Minister at the time, agreed to meet the veterans. But we need to see action now. Warm words aren't enough.
It's not enough meeting them and sending them a medal in a jiffy bag. It's not enough, Rebecca. Come on.
I agree.
Can we just
and
ask
we'll get on with it. Don't you worry. And I'll have to say, it's not just Labour MPs that have been at the forefront of this. It's one of those issues that unites Parliament, and there have been fantastic MPs from across the House. We've also been working very closely with Sir John Hayes from the Conservatives, who's been a huge supporter.
Well, get on with it. Clock's ticking.
Don't you worry.
Well, let's talk now to the Conservative MP for South Holland, the Deeping, Sir John Hayes. Sir John, morning to you. Our GB News viewers and listeners have been fabulous. They've been donating in their thousands of pounds. But really, we shouldn't have to be raising money for these veterans. The state should have stepped in a long time ago.
Absolutely. And that's what happened in America, Australia, Canada, because the nuclear test veterans were drawn from many places. It was a Commonwealth operation. It was a US-British operation. So, yes, you're right. Those other countries have stepped up, and so should we.
John, how would you describe the benefit of these tests for the rest of the world, actually, in terms of peace?
Well, just imagine it. Lots of very young men sent out to far-off places, not knowing what they were going to encounter. Very little was known then about the effects of radiation by the vast majority of the population. They were sent out there to test weapons that have subsequently kept us safe. Their contribution is immense to our safety, and that's why we managed to, after a long campaign, get a medal to recognise that contribution. Now we need to look at what more we can do to help these people, as they are now very aged, typically, because of when the test took place. And I think this is time for government to step up to the mark. I said that under the Conservatives, and now I'm saying under the current Labour government.
Yeah. It shouldn't take something like Mr Bates versus the Post Office. It took an ITV drama in that case, didn't it, Sir Hayes, to get it onto the desks of MPs. We've got to go. I'm so sorry to cut you off, Sir John Hayes, but we do want to talk to our veterans. Yeah. Thank you so much.
And thank you for your support for the veterans.
Yeah. Right, we are going to tell you in just a moment, aren't we, how much they've raised, and we will tell our veterans how much they've raised.
And we're going to tell
back here in the studio.
Absolutely, looking forward to talking to them again.
Anyway. Well, what a morning it's been for GB News, for you, and also for Alan Owen, the founder of LABRATS International, and Brian Unthank, a nuclear test veteran.
So we asked, the veterans want their holiday in Pontins next year. They had no sponsors, so we asked you, viewers and listeners to GB News, if you could help out. Well, you have. We wanted £25,000 to pay for the holiday. And
we're now at almost £36,000. Nearly 1,500 of you have donated this morning. Brian, what do you make of that?
If I said I was totally gobsmacked with the beautiful generosity of you, the presenters, and all of your viewers, I'm speechless. I really am.
Well, it means you can go to Pontins now, Brian,
Yeah.
with your nice lady wife.
Well, she'll tell me how to get there.
Right, right.
Well, you can pay to get there now as well. We've got,
And Alan, we've had 3 MPs of two Labour, 1 Tory, all saying that they're going to keep fighting the fight to get what the people like Brian deserve, that your father deserved. He's not with us now. Compensation.
Absolutely, and if only the UK government were so good and as quick as your veterans have been. I mean, we started off this with nothing this morning.
Right.
So to get to this figure in this short space of time just shows these guys deserve it.
How special is the week at Pontins, Brian?
Very special. As I said in our previous chat, we're made to feel warmed, welcomed, and everybody wants to talk to us. They want to hear our stories. We're all virtually telling, word for word, the same story about our experiences. And nobody in the civilian life believes of what we went through and the fact that we could see all our bones and tendons through our closed eyes and our hands pushed into our eyes. They don't believe us. If they were there, they would very quickly believe.
And Brian, you've had 92 skin cancers?
93.
93.
And I've got 2 more waiting to be cut out, and probably in the next 6 months, because it's been put back, there'll be more.
And 12, 13 miscarriages in your first... with
My
your
first wife. My son, by the wife that I'm with now, he has Duane syndrome. His right eye was locked into his nose and his left eye is locked forward. He had to have multiple operations to get it round, but now he's got this sort of vision. Please forgive me for showing you that way. My daughter, by this wife, has got skeletal and internal problems, and they don't know how to eradicate it because they don't know what's caused it.
We drew the comparison this morning with the post office scandal and how those people's lives were changed and in many ways ruined. But really, what you lost in terms of your health is everything. You know, you've done amazing. You're an amazing man, and you said earlier to me that you're not angry anymore. But it shouldn't take an ITV drama like the Mr. Bates to raise awareness. I am optimistic now after this morning. I think that perhaps these MPs, with those strong northern women behind you, you might see some sort of justice. And
there is a documentary coming out by the end of the year about us, and we're hoping that will push Keir Starmer. I've met Keir Starmer.
Right.
When he was in opposition, and he made lots of promises in opposition, and we need him now to come through.
And people have been giving so generously this morning because they are shocked and appalled
Absolutely.
at how badly let down you've been by your father, who's not with us now, Brian, by successive governments. They're shocked.
And it's 72 years.
Yeah.
I mean, 72 years today.
I mean, we thought the Hillsborough, it took 25 years to get compensation for Hillsborough. It is extraordinary, 72 years.
Yes,
and
definitely.
Brian, you're 86 now.
Yep. And it was called A Midwife, one of their programmes, who highlighted the problems that the families are having for their newborn.
Yes.
Right.
Because the disabilities that are coming through, this is going to go on for the next 500 years before it washes out of our systems. So I feel sorry for the generations to come. They've got no knowledge. By the time we've gone, even after Alan's gone, because he's a lot younger man than what I am, good looking as he is, people would have totally forgotten about us.
And that's what we can't allow. We can't allow them to be forgotten. No. And we need this government to step up now. We've lost so many. We've lost so many.
Just do me a favour, fellas. Look down a camera and thank our viewers today. What camera do you want them at? That number 3 there, with the blank monitor underneath it. If you would look down there and just thank our viewers because they're everything.
Well, on behalf of the nuclear community and the families, the veterans, my father, who's not here today, just to say thank you for your generosity. We were mind blown in the first hour what you've done, and to thank you to GB News for what you've done to raise awareness of it to your viewership. But your generosity, I mean, we've been sat backstage here just watching the count go up going, my word, it's unbelievable.
Brian?
My gasp has never been so flabbered, like Alan said. Such wonderful people, you and the viewers.
Lovely. Brian, well done. That's
Thank
it.
you, guys.
And thank you from Bev and I to Britain's Newsroom's viewers and listeners for your incredible, warm-hearted generosity. That's it from us.